Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. I wonder whether you can hear me. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah, my name is David, admin manager of Pre-Uni New College head office, and I'll be hosting the webinar tonight regarding the 2024 selective school exam information. Yeah. So tonight, I'd like to share the updated information about the selective school exam, including the application process and test structure and analyzing exam question style, and lastly, how to prepare for the exam for the remaining preparation period. And I also invite our teacher, Ms. Nama, and she will provide more detailed information about the exam next year. Okay. Before we begin, I'd like to address a few housekeeping matters. So if you have any question during the presentation, you can type them into your chat box. Yeah, chat box is available, and I will try to allocate Q&A time at the end for your questions. And also, we are recording this webinar so that you can watch or replay again at your convenient time after the webinar session. Then you can have a chance to get a comprehensive review about the contents of this webinar. Okay, let's get started. Yeah. Okay, firstly, foremost, I want to express my appreciation for your effort and for your unwavering support for your child study during this term. And now we are approaching the conclusion of the term. We have just 1 week to go for the term 2. And we are preparing for your child's term test report now. That will be released at the end of the term. So it will be very important to examine your report so that you can track your child's progress. And our goal is to provide you with the comprehensive and valuable information about your child's progress. Yes. And additionally, I'd like to bring your attention to the upcoming winter holiday course and term 3 course as well. Yeah? So please ensure to check our latest newsletter about the schedule, course schedule. And it's also available on our website, Cyber School as well. So please keep updated with us. And I'd like to also inform that the early bird discount offer will be available until this Saturday for the winter holiday course enrollment. So please don't miss out the maximum discount offer from us. Yeah. And term 3 course early bird discount will be available until 3rd of July, which is Monday. Yeah. Okay. I will cover some information about the course of term 3 and winter course in the later part. Okay, so today's main topic, selective school placement information for our students. Yeah, our target is to secure placement in a selective school for the 2025 year 7 entry. Undoubtedly, this endeavor will be very significant challenges. It's going to be very challenging journey, but our students has a very good potential. So I firmly believe that taking this worthwhile journey will be truly rewarding at the end. So we are here and prepared to support your child's study in every stage of this process and journey. So let's do our best to achieve our outcome successfully. Okay. So I don't have to explain every single information about selective school system because you already knew. So in New South Wales, there are 47 selective schools, which cater highly achieving students. Yeah. So there are 17 fully selective schools, which is most popular schools, students and parents, and including the 4 agricultural high schools, which is also fully selective schools. So 21 fully selective schools. And also there are partially selective schools. Yeah, there are 26 partially selective schools. It is less popular, but it's still very good to choose as a selective education option. So these schools, there are 1 or 2 classes. There are selective stream, delivering selective curriculum, and there are also non-selective classes for local students. So yeah, that's why we are calling it partially selective school. So partially selective school students, and they will group together and study English, mathematics and science, with one team. But the non-selective students will do other activities with non-selective school students. And yes, 47 selective schools. Yeah. So this list shows the all available selective high school in New South Wales, and also number of places available for year 7 and 3. Yeah, as you can see, fully selective school, they have 120 to 180 places available, and partially selective school, generally 60 seats or 30 seats, depending on the school. The total number of places, 4,248. That is the total number of available places for year 7 and 3. So in case of last year, there were more than 15,000 applicants for the selective school. I think this year still more than 15,000. So generally speaking, to get into selective school, they should achieve at least the top 23% of the top achievers group. Yeah. Yeah, it looks very challenging, very competitive. Yeah. Very high demand for the selective school entry. And from last year, they also introduced a new equity placement model, equity placement policy, that reserve around 20%, maximum 20% of available places for the special low socio-educational advantage group, and also the Aboriginal students and students with disability, and some students who live in rural and remote area. They want to attract them to try selective school placement, and they will consider around 20% of places to reserve for them. But to get into selective school, anyway, those group students also should achieve a certain level of test performance. So there will be first round offer for 75% of students. 75% of students will get a first round offer, and 20% from the equity placement group, and around 5% for students who couldn't attend the exam due to lots of reasons. So, but if there are not enough students to offer the special equity placement policy, the remaining seat will be released to the general applicant. So as a result, last year around 2% of special group got an offer, and most of the places will be was offered to general population, general applicants. So as long as you try to perform well enough to get in first round offer, it doesn't affect too much for your trial this outcome. Okay, yeah, all your question, yeah, I can see lots of questions. I will take a look at the end. Yeah. Okay, I got an exam date. Yeah, the exam date for next year selective exam is 9th of May. Yeah, it's officially announced from the Department of Education, the 9th of May, which is second week of term 2. Yeah. So the application will start from 9th October, which is spring holiday. Yeah, spring holiday. Yeah. And they need to finish the application by 20th of November. That's the duration for the application, and you will complete your application by 20th of November. Yeah. Okay. And the exam is 9th of May. Yeah, 9th of May. And they said the outcome will be released on 23rd of August. 23rd of August. So these are all official dates. So please keep in mind all key dates for your child. So the test format, it will remain the same as this year. 4 tests: reading, mathematical reasoning, thinking skills, and writing. There is no school mark. You need to achieve very good score in the test. Achieving the high level performance in the exam will most likely decide your outcome. And the test format, it will be paper-based format, like this year. Next year, selective school exam will be paper-based. So we can stick to the same paper format in our trial test. For the remaining period, it will be paper-based trial test. And the weight of each test component will remain the same. Thinking skill, 35%, reading 25%, writing 15%, and mathematical reasoning 25%. So getting the very high mark in thinking skill will be very crucial. It's vital. We need to focus on thinking skills. We do more focus on thinking skills, to maximize the test performance. So for those people who haven't checked the past papers, it's still available on the website. And you can check the 2021 and 2022 selective school exam paper. And also we posted all the question review video on our YouTube channel. So we went through all the questions appeared in the previous years, including this year's one as well. So you please check out our YouTube channel, and your child can check the most recent questions appeared in the selective school exam. So after this year's exam, last May, we had a very thorough survey and interview with our year 6 students about this year's exam, and one of the questions was which test was the most challenging for them, and we found that the most challenging test was thinking skills due to very strict time frame, 40 minutes, and lots of questions they need to tackle, 40 questions, 40 minutes. So definitely thinking skill will be the most crucial part for next year's exam. So we have to make sure our students fully prepare for all kind of strategy for the thinking skill test. Okay. That's why I invited Ms. Naila, who is quite expert in thinking skill areas. So yes, let's find out more information about thinking skills. And to do that, yeah, we have Ms. Naila here. Yeah. So now I'd like to hand over to Ms. Naila. Yeah. And start presentation. Okay. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for coming or tuning into this webinar. Thank you, David, for inviting me so that I can hopefully share a bit more insight into how we can better prepare our students and your children for the Selective Schools Thinking Skills Test. As you have probably just seen in regards to the surveys done previously, and also probably from your own experiences, you can see that thinking skills number one has one of the highest weightings among all those 4 tests that is conducted for the selective schools placement test, but also the level of difficulty on that is a lot more trickier compared to the other tests. So hopefully I'll be able to give you a few tips and pointers of things that I've noticed over the years and how we can best cater towards that to really maximize your child's potential in terms of building their thinking skills. All right, let's begin. So in specifics, this is what I'll be presenting on. I'll be talking specifically about what exactly is thinking skills. I know that we have covered this quite a lot, but what's really important is really understanding the main key components within there to understand, and also a bit of a rejogging of exactly what is encompassed within thinking skills. Also, what's going to be discussed are the types of thinking skills questions, which is quite a lot, and what are the problems students are facing, as well as some tips that can cater to those problems that students are facing in regards to solving thinking skills questions. And then hopefully and then I'll hand it back to David so he can address any questions or queries that you may have. Okay, so first of all, what exactly is thinking skills? So when defining the term thinking, this can be seen as the flow of ideas, which is exactly correct. However, in our everyday lives, we're always thinking, but everyday thinking can be defined as surface level thoughts. However, this is not exactly thinking skills. For example, if I'm asked if I'd like tea or coffee, no effort is actually needed to answer this question. But when you're thinking a bit more in depth about what the selective schools exam is focusing on in terms of thinking skills, it's rather a skill that requires that higher order thinking, and there are a variety of components and skills required to apply. And so these skills include critical thinking, creative thinking, problem solving, computational thinking, ethical reasoning, and metacognition. Now, probably the main ones that they really focus on is that critical thinking and problem solving. However, you will notice that within these thinking skills questions, and what we've analyzed is that it uses a whole variety of these skill components and within that one question. So it's really important to really understand the types of thinking skills questions, what exactly thinking skills covers, and overall how we can tackle on this. Okay, so the thinking skills test. Within the thinking skills component for the selective schools exam, students are required to answer 40 questions within a 40-minute time limit. So if you think about it, 40 questions, 40 minutes means that you have to be answering 1 question per minute. And all questions are multiple choice, so that's giving you that option from A to D. And the test is designed to assess students' verbal, spatial, and numerical reasoning skills, such as finding procedures, identifying similarity, evaluating evidence and reasoning, identifying mistakes, and logical analysis. So you'll notice that thinking skills, and what we've mentioned is that thinking skills has the highest weighting among all four tests. And you'll notice that this can be quite challenging because, number one, schools don't have a specific subject where they teach thinking skills. And so we understand this to be something where it has to be an acquired skill that you learn over time, or it's something that you build up on through your learning experiences overall. And so, and also what makes this quite a lot more trickier is that it's a combination of being able to assess students' verbal reasoning, so that English component, as well as their numerical reasoning, putting it together. So that's the overall idea behind the thinking skills test. Now, if we have a look, there are two different main types of thinking skills questions, as I've mentioned. The main ones that are focused within the placement test is problem-solving questions and critical thinking questions. Now, even within these two categories, there are many different types of problem-solving questions. So this is just within the problem-solving questions realms. We've got finding procedures, identifying similarity, as well as relevant selections questions. And then even within these three subheadings, there are still many different types of subtopics within. So within a thinking skills questions, you might have a problem-solving question focusing on finding procedures, and the main area that it's looking at is on 2D shapes. Or you might have a problem-solving type thinking skills questions focusing on identifying similarity, but but the underlying skill that you have to work on is making conclusions. So you can see that there are a whole different range or varieties of different problem-solving questions within the thinking skills section, which can be quite a wordful, but you'll notice that it's those small differences that ultimately change, out of the 4 options you are given, what the answer can be. And so it's being able to really understand each type of problem solving or thinking skills questions that will ultimately prevent making those silly, simple mistakes that I think all students have the potential not to be able to make. Okay, now that was problem solving questions. These are the different types of critical thinking different types of critical thinking questions. And so within here, it's more focused on our English, being able to understand those underlying arguments, conclusions. You can see here that these are all the different categories that are focused. And within those categories, there are smaller differences within each question. It's definitely a lot harder to be able to identify those main things, but you'll notice that within critical thinking questions as well, there's like a set, not a set, but there is a recommended approach that you can take to be able to solve these questions. And the more we practice and understand what exactly we're doing to solve these questions, the hopefully easier it becomes to be able to solve them. So you can see here some of the categories are applying principles, assessing the impact of additional evidence, detect reasoning errors, drawing a conclusion, identifying assumptions, identifying the main conclusion, and matching arguments. Now, as I've mentioned just beforehand, there isn't just one way to be able to solve a thinking skills question. There are, obviously, depending on the different types of questions that we have, there are different approaches, many different types of approaches of questions that you can take. Now, however, this is probably the most, one of the foundational basic ways that you can begin with to be able to effectively solve a thinking skills question. And then hopefully the more familiar you become with it, the better you become, and you start to find ways that can help you find your own style to be able to solve thinking skills questions. So here is a quick little step-by-step procedure on how we solve them. Step 1 is reading the question. Step 2 being reading the argument. Step 3, paraphrasing the argument using your own words. Step 4, focusing on predicting the answer. And then step 5, eliminating wrong answers and finding the best answer. Now, what I find within here is probably step 1, all steps are very important. And you can see that each one has a set purpose, which is very important to do. Key thing that you need to be careful of is that what I've noticed is some students in step 5, they won't read every single answer option. And so then they'll just look at the first option and they'll be like, oh, that's the correct one. And they will then tend to miss out on looking at the other options because they're so sure of the first one. And so it's important to be able to follow through with step 5 and eliminate those wrong answers to find the best answer. Now, on the right-hand side here, there is a QR code that you can scan, which leads you onto explaining to you, everyone in a bit more detail on how we apply these steps into actually solving thinking skills questions and sample videos to show how this works. Now, in addition to this, what's really important is that with the thinking skills questions that you may have, trying these out yourself to be able to see how it works is a very important step that you take. All right, so the thinking skills test in the selective schools exam. Now, we've already acknowledged it, and I'll just one more time explain it so we completely understand. It is probably, or it is, as most students find it, the most challenging and difficult component of the exam. It is also the highest weighting subject as well, and possibly for these many numbers of reasons. First of all, it's newly introduced, so there isn't much understanding, as well as expertise, or it's very newly introduced, and so there's quite a lot of confusion behind it, and it's a lot of research that needs to be taken upon to be able to really completely understand how thinking skills works. Another reason is that it's not a core subject taught in schools explicitly. We may be teaching this as a soft skill here and there, where we're asking students in real life situations or in day-to-day situations in school to solve problems. However, it's not a main core subject that is taught explicitly step by step. Another thing is that there aren't many available resources really tackling on this idea or component of thinking skills and really focusing on what the selective schools placement exams are focusing on. We do have thinking skills resources available, but they may not be tailored towards selective schools. And in addition to this, there is also a limited number of expert teachers and educators that really can understand what thinking skills is. So if we have a look here, these are from our extensive interviews and looking at the data that we've gathered, we can see that this is an example from a very similar reasoning of what's come out in this year's paper. So you can see within here, there is a bit of verbal reasoning, or this is a verbal reasoning question that's come up. And so you can see that it's really important to be able to completely understand, follow that step-by-step method to answer this thinking skills question. So number one, reading that question. Number two, being able to read the question, be able to understand all the processes within there, excuse me, being able to paraphrase as well as predict what your answer is, and then eliminate your answer options within there. So you can see that within here, there's a reasoning part. Some of the words or the scenario in itself can be a bit tricky to understand. In this question here, this is an example of not only, it's quite logic-based, because what you've got to do is you have to read the question very carefully, but you have to also make assumptions within this question. And what, from my experience where I've taught students in with these kinds of questions, it's really interesting to see that students struggle with being able to make assumptions and assume potential answers, and from there working backwards to be able to solve this question. So this is another example of a type of question that has come up. And yes, it may take a long time at first to be able to solve it, which then results in students determining what's the best way to do it. Is it better to actually take on this question and spend those extra few minutes, or is it better to move on and answer more questions within that pace? So it's a lot of determining within here. All right, another type of question within here, this is more numerical based. So you can see that there is a map with distances, a type of network travel map distance. And so you can see what's really important is being able to understand using not only logic reasoning, but also looking at the potential options and then using mathematics to be able to help you solve this question as well. Okay. If we have a look at the next one here, this is another example that's just been given. It's a question to do with knowing, or what makes this question a little tricky is that it's using language that we're not familiar with. So it's creating this scenario, like a real life scenario, but we're not, in this case, we're not quite familiar with it because it's not what is standard within Australia, in our society. And so this can throw off some students. And so what's really important is understanding that certain thinking skills questions we have to focus on within there, just for this question, and believe that it is true. And so from here, you can, once you're able to understand and understand the data or the question, the scenario that they've given you, then it should be a lot more easier to be able to approach this question. Okay, so although I'm not able to explain every single question in a lot more detail, hopefully you're able to take the time just to have, we're able to just have a look and see the different skills that were needed within each type of question to be able to solve it. Okay, now I'm going to move on to some problems that students are facing, as well as the tips that we can, that you can take on to be able to eliminate or reduce those mistakes that students are facing. So the first issue is that students are unfamiliar with the various types of thinking skills questions. So I've already mentioned this before and we've already covered through it, but it's really important that students know the many different types of thinking skills questions. Yes, we know that there are two main types, that there are problem solving and critical thinking questions, but within there, there's also many different types of questions that there are many different types of questions that within those critical thinking and problem solving questions. And so it's being exposed to as many different types of thinking skills questions to be able to then be able to take on the best approach to be able to solve the question and choose your best available option. So this tip to be able to eliminate that problem is that ensure that students are familiar with the many types of questions. So how do we do that? It's important to make sure you get that continuous exposure and practice to a variety of question types. So I know that the WMT course, within the thinking skills component, every week they go through a different type of thinking skills question. And so through there, it's that practice questions that you get during in class, but not only that, that online component also should help to get that exposure and that practice within there. Also knowing the different strategies to solving these questions. As I've mentioned before, we've got that example of a thinking skills, the basic foundational approach to solving thinking skills questions. And of course, that's not the only way that you need to take to solve it, but that's one of the different ways. And then slowly, as the more confident you become in being able to solve these types of questions, the better you become with being confident and knowing the best strategy. Okay, issue number 2 is that some students do not know key critical thinking skills vocabulary. So what we've noticed is that these are the buzz and keywords that constantly come up within our thinking skills questions. Words such as assumption, flaw, strengthen, weakening, hinders, conclusion, reasoning, statement, intended, supports, and there are many, many more. Now, these words are definitely not something that's commonly used within Year 5 primary school students, but it is jargon, but it is specific subject-specific knowledge within thinking skills that must be known if you are serious about being able to pursue and get into that selective school. And so really understanding those key words will help to really understand, and it will make it a lot easier to be able to solve your questions, because what we've noticed is that sometimes when questions are really big and there's a lot of reading involved within there, it starts to students start to become quite tired, or they start to avoid the question because they know that it's a lot of effort involved, but including those like hard vocab words. And so if we are able to, if students know those key vocab terminology, it does ease how difficult that question could potentially be. So tip number 2, I've already explained it, but ensure that students thoroughly understand each key vocabulary term. So know the synonyms that are related to those words. Know the antonyms related to it. Simple definitions, so that when you are able to, when you see that question initially, you are able to break it down into simple words that so you can understand that question better. And also knowing how exactly it applies in thinking skills questions, because we know that there are within words, there are many different ways that you can use this word, and it has many different meanings. So knowing exactly how would make it a lot easier. All right. Issue number 3 is that students are not strategic with the time frame. Now, I do see that there is a question about how does a kid make a choice whether to solve or skip the question? Well, within here, there are 40 questions within 40 minutes, which is quite a limited time frame within there, because the students are expected to, one, not only be able to focus and really use their critical thinking brains or higher order thinking skills for 40 minutes straight, which is definitely a challenge, but also being able to solve at a rate of 1 question per minute can be quite tricky. So what you'll notice is that the more you'll do these questions, thinking skills questions, or practice doing selective thinking skills practice exams, you'll notice that your child has more strength in the different types of thinking skills questions. Maybe your child may be stronger within the problem solving area of thinking skills, and maybe your child might be better at the verbal reasoning aspect of the thinking skills questions. So then it might be better then for your child to be able to quickly solve through those verbal reasoning questions that they're strong at. Then that will give them a bit more time to work on those numerical reasoning questions at the end. So it really is a bit of a balance, but what's really important is not spending 5-10 minutes on just this one question. So it's a lot of, at that moment, how do you work through this? And so it's that fine balance between knowing when to make that choice, So some extra tips on how you can be strategic with your time is that you know that each question is worth 1 mark. It would be better to be able to spend 5 minutes on 5 questions that you're quite confident in, rather than spending 5 minutes on that one question only. Now, be strict with your time when solving through these questions. Okay. Now, another issue that has arisen is that students are not using process of elimination when working through critical thinking type thinking skills questions. Now, I've mentioned this briefly before when I was explaining that it's important to do step 5 within the basic approach to solving thinking skills questions. But what's really important is being able to choose being able to read through each of the 4 options and then eliminating and identifying how this answer is related in relation to the actual question. And what I mean by that specifically is more like when you're looking at making conclusions or detect reasoning error questions, or focusing on strengthening and weakening questions, where they give you 4 options and it will say which one best strengthens or best weakens. And you need to have a look at there's 4 options, and usually 2 of them are strengthening, 1 of them is weakening, and 1 of them is irrelevant. What's really important, and this is what I always really stress upon to students, is being able to identify what each of them are within those 4 options. So is A strengthening one? Is it irrelevant? Is it weakening in relation to that, what the question's asking you? So that's why it's really important to do that critical process of elimination process, or step-by-step method to be able to answer your question. So being really building that and making that a habit is quite important. Now, if you have a look, the tip for this is accurately and carefully eliminating through each of the options when looking at critical thinking questions. So for example, and I've said this before, 2 options are always going to be supporting the argument. There's always going to be 2 options that are very similar, and you need to choose between the 2, which one's better. then you've got one option that's completely irrelevant and another option that is against that argument. And remember, the question usually says best supports, best strengthens, best weakens, best explains, best summarizes. So you need to choose out of the four which one is most in relation to that main question or that main argument that they're giving you. All right, another issue that has come to my attention is that some students do not have a wide knowledge of that general knowledge aspect. So within, as we've mentioned, thinking skills has those two main components, critical thinking and problem solving. Now, within critical thinking, it's really important to be able to look at those worldly issues to answer these questions. So being very up to date with what's happening in the media, what's happening within the world is very important. You'll notice that within our selective schools or OC, and even within those practice pass papers, a lot of the critical thinking questions are based on worldly issues that has happened recently. So there's quite a few on COVID, there's quite a few on recycling, sustainability, and all of these are very important issues that are right now within the media. But not only that, we talk about technology, artificial intelligence, health, social issues, and which covers a vast range, and history overall, and how that relates to now. So being able to build that wide range of history and that breadth of general knowledge is quite important, but will also make it a lot easier for you to solve and tackle critical thinking based questions. Now, in terms of problem solving, sometimes problem solving questions are not as tricky as you think if you know these things, such as knowing your deck of cards, knowing what are the different suits within a deck of cards, how many are within, what are the different cards within there, rules of certain particular games. I remember there was this one instance of a question, problem solving thinking skills questions, which was based on the game of tennis. And so a lot of students found that quite tricky because they didn't understand the scoring system within tennis. But if you were able to think back, or if you had exposure to that, it became a lot easier to be able to understand that question, because they were trying to explain how the actual game point system works. So if you already knew that, then it becomes a lot easier to answer that question. In addition to that, patterns and rules of games, I think the highest recommendation with rules of games is being able to read through instructions, to as many instructions, and completely understanding that, because these problem solving types questions will really try and access that knowledge of, are you able to understand how to the point scoring system of a game, and so forth. All right, so if we have a look here, tip 5 is to build on general knowledge in a number of areas and fields. So reading newspaper articles, watching documentaries, news reports, researching and listening to podcasts and interviews are definitely things that you can embed in your everyday life or within the day to be able to improve that knowledge. All right, issue number 6 is that students do not have enough exposure to a variety of questions to solve questions within the time limit. So as we've said, it's a very tight time limit, and that is 40 questions within 40 minutes. And so if we have a look within here, it's being able to know and getting that practice of all these different types of questions that come up within thinking skills. And it's just all about being familiar. The more we do things, the better we get at it. I mean, that's why we have the saying, practice makes perfect. And so, and one more issue that I will bring up before I give you a tip to tackle both of these issues is that students are not believing the thinking skills question logic for that situation. And sometimes these situations do not reflect society in real life. So this question example, although a little simple, we can see that this could throw students off because they're like, hang on a minute, that's not correct. In real life, that's never the case. And so being able to once again, I've mentioned this before, being able to put yourself in that scenario and believe that that's the logic within this question is very important. So an ant is larger than a bus, and a bus is larger than a galaxy. If a shoe is larger than a galaxy but smaller than an ant, which is the smallest? So it's really important to be able to discern and just believe what the question's asking you for that moment before to be able to accurately solve that question. And it's really, I can understand where it can be quite tricky, because there are some times where we have to apply real life worldly knowledge, and then some areas where we have to believe what the question's asking us. So it's really understanding the types of thinking skills questions and knowing when to do that and when not to do that is really important. So if we have a look, for tips 6 and 7, it's important to ensure that students get enough practice in solving a wide range of questions within a set time frame. Okay, what makes the thinking skills test quite tricky is that time frame, but not only that, and the level of difficulty within there as well. But the more practice we get solving within under pressure and within that set time frame, the better we become at it. So 10 thinking skills questions of different types to solve within 10 minutes, and making use of all resources available to you, which is not a lot. And so whatever's available is quite important. And you don't have to always get something new all the time. Maybe after some time, redoing those old ones that you've done before to show how much growth and how much understanding you've had, well, that is quite important as well. Okay, well, that's all that I'll be talking about today for thinking skills. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully that was a few extra tips that you were able to take on board, and definitely if there are any questions that you have, please feel free to ask. I'll hand it back to David. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Naila. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, we got heaps of questions. Yeah, I will address it after a few remaining slides and then finish. Okay, so we will soon find out our year 6 students' outcome for this year's selective school exam. So yeah, I'm quite excited. Yeah, 2 months to go. So in the case of last year, yeah, as you may know, we got fantastic result in the selective school outcome. So overall, we have more than 1,000 students who got an offer from, the selective school. Yeah, so it is fantastic. So we want to keep our success story with your students, with your child. So yeah, let's try our best. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So lots of good feedback, testimonial. Yeah, every year we got very positive feedback from our parents about our courses. Yeah. So yeah, we need to continue with our best strategy for our students. Yeah. So it's your turn. Yeah. So yeah, for term 3 and term 4, we will put more focus on building up the thinking skill and also the reading comprehension skill. That's the most important test component in the exam. So the STTC will be continued, and also we will organize special test event, which the ASAP, which is very popular. There's several thousand students every year, several thousand students to join this event, and we are still in the process of finalizing the schedule, and we will announce it at the beginning of term 3. Yeah. So during the application period, the ASAT result will give you a very good indication about your child's achievement level and the suitable school choices. Yeah. And we will make use of all available school holiday period with the intensive courses, starting from coming winter course. So we will start holiday course from 3rd of July, and we will make use of 2 weeks. Yeah? So first week, we will do intensive course with all entire revision of English, math, and thinking skill. And for those students who want just focus on thinking skill or reading comprehension skill, yeah, we have a special course, a new course in the second week, yeah, for 4 days. So yeah, we got heaps of enrollment for these courses, and yeah, still available to enroll. So please don't miss out this course. Okay. Okay, and in term 3, yes, as I mentioned before, the comprehension skill in reading part and thinking skill, yeah, we will put more focus on that, and students can experience with lots of all the essential question types, yes, through the WMT, yeah, and all the cyber school services will be up and running, and it will be growing. And with more resources, you can make use of during the term. So please know all available cyber school services and utilize them as a very valuable resources for your child to study. Okay. For the selective trial test course, we will offer a full 11 weeks term 3 STTC, followed by holiday STTC. Yeah. So in 2024, summer holiday will be very intensive, 9 days. So these are all confirmed the schedule for the STTC. And especially term 3 is very important period because the STTC result will greatly affect your child's school choice option. Okay? So during the application period, the only available resource for me is your child's STTC performance. Yeah, from last year, there will be no minimum entry score available for students. So we can only rely on their STTC performance. Yeah. Based on STTC performance and the actual outcome, we have a very reliable database to assess and recommend your child's school choices. So to do that, we need at least term 2 and term 3 STTC record. So if your child hasn't started yet, term 3 is the great start point to do STTC. Okay. STTC also provides lots of cyber school services, including test review for thinking skill and mathematical reasoning, and additional reading test practice, and also the poem annotation guide video, as well as writing guide video. And lots of additional tests to build up their vocabulary skills. So please make use of all the available STTC cyber school services as well. Then you can make a big difference at the end of the course. Okay, so I think we need to go through the question. So please remember, without your child's dedication and effort and willingness to push, results will remain unchanged. So your motivation will play a critical role as a parents during this journey, and we will do our best to assist you every step during the journey. Okay. Okay. We have just a few minutes to do some Q&A. Let's have a look on your questions. Too many. I'm not sure whether I can answer all these questions. The term 3 reports will be ready during the last week of the term, and the report will contain your child's position. The position, the relative position from all pre-uni students, including all 19 branches in New South Wales. Okay, so not just for the specific branch, including all branches. Can we listen to section? Yes, this webinar is being recorded. So once we close the session, you can just use the same webinar room link. Then it will just redirect to the replay room. Then you can just play and watch again. One of the parents from South Australia. There is no selective school system in South Australia yet. Victoria, they have 4 selective schools. Okay. And will school send any mark for students for the selective school exam? No, there is no school assessment score for the selective school placement. And the exam score will only the available score they can make use to give an offer. So test mark will only used for placement process. Do they have a school score next year? No, there is no school score. This year, no school score. Next year, no. The QR code in the slide. Yes, when you replay the webinar, you can see the QR code for the past papers and also the YouTube channel. So you can just use your camera to get the link. What is the qualifying mark? Qualifying, what does it mean, qualifying mark? So the minimum score to get into the selective school will vary every year, depending on your child's relative position from the applicant group or specific school. So they will rank the students according to their test score, and they will try to select top students, top group only, So it depends on the number of places and also their rank in the test. Okay. Yes, if you want to see our slide, why not? I can share through the cyber school. Just check the news section, and I will just post onto the news section with this slide. Yes, the past papers are available to download from the Department of Education website. Just go to the Selective School Placement Unit website, or you can check the QR code in the slide. Okay. What is the ASET? When does it happen? The ASET is special one-day testing event before the selective school application and also before the actual exam. So there will be 2 ASET events, which will be in term 4 and in term 1 next year. So 2 ASET. So ASET stands for Australian Selective Achievement Test, acronym. There is no 2023 test paper available yet. Probably in early next year, they may publish, not now. We have WMT and STTC. WMT is regular foundation plus learning course, and they will study the basic knowledge, foundation, and concepts for all essential exam topics. And then they can do the trial test with STTC. So it provides quite similar level of mock exam paper, and they will do the question practice, test practice under the same exam condition, same time limit, same format of the exam paper. So that's the difference. So if your child is very, you believe your child is already got a very strong foundation, they may try the trial test first. Otherwise, they need to do the WMT for the foundation study. Will the test be taking place at our school or as well? It will be external testing center. It will be usually the local government high school near your place. So the students from the same primary school will be allocated into the same testing center. It's an assembly hall in the government high school, not your school. Okay. Between the tests, yeah, there are short break, 10 minutes each. Maybe after 2 tests, there'll be longer break, like 20 minutes. Yeah. So there are breaks between the tests. Yeah. The winter holiday course doesn't cover the STTC because we need to focus on the OCTTC because the exam is just around the corner. So you can start holiday STTC from spring school holiday, not upcoming winter. Yeah, for the STTC, yeah, it depends on your school choices. To get a top 10 selective school, they need to achieve very high ranked STTC score. Yeah, it depends on the student's preference of the school choice. So you can discuss with me later during the application period. Okay, and the exam date, yes, next year exam date is 9th of May, second week of term 2, yeah, Thursday, 9th of May. So we have around 10 months to go. Yeah, James Lewis, yeah, we got more than 62 or 67 James Lewis students every year, yeah. So around half of the students, yeah. James Lewis cater 120 places, and normally more than 60 students, they came from the Pre-Uni New College. Yeah. Yeah, there is no minimum score available for selective school, yeah, because they don't release any specific test score. So it's very hard to say which mark will get into James Lewis. But in terms of the STTC, usually over 82% in the trial test, Pre-Uni New College STTC will have a good chance to get into James Lewis, yeah, around 82 or above score. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Yeah, I will give my email address so that you can email me with any specific question. Yeah. My email address is david@newcollege.com.au, and I'm more than welcome to receive your email with any question, and I will answer your question as quickly as possible. So thank you very much for joining tonight's webinar. And next term, yeah, I will see you again with more update on the exam. Okay. Thank you and have a good evening.